It's always such a joy and a pleasure to see you, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you, Layla. Always a pleasure to see you, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, and coming from the voice of public broadcasting, right, PBS Hawaii, share with us what's new and how you fit into the free speech conversation.
You know, it's a fundamental right. I believe that from day one, and not just being an American, but just being a human. And I learned that early in my career as a broadcast journalist, the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and, you know, there's no compromising that. I mean, everything that I stood for as a journalist was done with integrity, but also understanding the responsibility that came with freedom of speech, you know, and freedom of press. And I still feel that way. And I preach it to my children, who are now adults, and I preach it to not preach it, but I share that message with our team at PBS Hawaii as well. We provide access, but we also provide that vehicle of uncensored messages.
So share a little bit more about some of the initiatives and programs that PBS offers that exemplifies that.
Well, for us, it starts early for our programming, and it's really something that developed 10 years ago. We're starting our 11th year of Hiki no.
Wow.
And we're developing tomorrow's storytellers, but I say it's beyond that. And storytelling is one aspect of being able to communicate, but really we're developing tomorrow's leaders. And part of that conversation is providing our students the opportunity to say whatever they need to say. During the pandemic, it became student reflections. They literally turned the cameras on themselves. And it organically became this healing element of storytelling that some of these students really got raw, you know, and shared deep challenges that they were enduring. And some of them would have been taboo 10 years ago.
And with the youth voices as leading the examples, how else is PBS helping the audience, I guess, understand how important that fundamental right is?
The reality is that is, like I said, our responsibility, our kuleana, to make sure that we're providing, again, the opportunity for voice, and oftentimes opportunity for the voiceless. And not only that vehicle, but also the access to see that. So whether it be through linear or broadcast television, or as we all becoming very familiar with the digital space, we need to understand that people consume their content very differently these days. My children don't watch television at all, you know, but they will get their content elsewhere. So sometimes we have to get out of our box or silo or thinking that this is the avenue, this is the path, and really meet them in their space. Again, freedom of speech, freedom of the press has to evolve with community and technology, and we're doing that right now at PBS for sure.
You know, you mentioned the word leadership a little while ago. How do we inculcate, I guess, the concepts of free speech within leadership and prepare people for that?
What you're speaking of is, I think, an opportunity for leadership across every industry, even our industry. Get out of our silos, you know, collaborate and make a difference in community, whatever you're doing, whether it be the fight against hunger, public access to communication. You know, truthfully, it's like kako. It's we're all in this together. You know, that's not a cliche. That should be coming from your heart.
Yes, and so that also implies trust, alleviating the fears of competition, the fears that I won't look as good as you if I speak the truth.
Yeah.
How would you address that coming from PBS?
You know, what you speak of is, again, part of my life, you know, and not being afraid to tell the story or share the truth. When I was a journalist, there were so many times that I was literally fighting not to be even censored on our station. Fear of losing advertising. Oh my gosh, that's a sponsor. We can't do that story. Then I'm in the wrong business. And I went to war sometimes with management, and even threatening walking out on the job. Not that I was all that, but understanding that was my kuleana, that was my role. And continue now in PBS Hawaii the same way. You know, not being afraid to speak up, and not being afraid of retaliation. And that's freedom of speech.
So parting words to the audience in terms of how one might develop that self-confidence to speak truth, universal truth.
It all starts with trust, like you said. trust not only in your message, and freedom of speech can only go so far. I mean, if
There are boundaries.
if you're perpetuating wrong statements or untruths, and that's not what I'm speaking. I'm speaking about trusting the message that you have is true, but also trusting the community that's receiving it, and understanding that relationship and how vital that is, and how quickly you can deteriorate and really taint that in one wrong message.
And coming from that heart of aloha that you speak of, for the greater good of your family, the community, the islands.
Yeah, it's important. It's who we are, and it's always who we've been, and who we need to be moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. As always, it's a pleasure and inspiring to hear you.
Thank you, Len.
Thank you. You've just had the pleasure of getting to know Ron Mizutani, the President and CEO of PBS Hawaii.